The roses died first. Adaeze Obinna noticed it in the way only a bride can notice a thing that means nothing to everyone else. A slowed browning at the edges of the ivory petals she clutched in both hands, a smell shifting from sweetness into something almost ceremonial, the scent of an ending. She'd been standing at the head of the aisle for 23 minutes. She knew because she'd been counting. A woman left standing long enough starts counting anything. 300 guests sat behind her in the grand hall of the Jade Pavilion Hotel, Johannesburg's most ostentatious address, a monument of marble and money. The string quartet at the far end had played the processional suite 3 times through. They were now performing something unscripted and faintly mournful, the way musicians do when no one has told them what to do with their hands, but everyone needs the silence filled. The officiant, a round, kind-faced man named Pastor Emmanuel, had checked his watch 5 times. He was now staring at the carpet. Park Hyunwoo should have been standing beside her. He had been, in a way, standing beside her for 4 years. He'd stood beside her in the rain outside the National Gallery in London when she'd said yes to a second date. He'd stood beside her in the fluorescent aisles of a Johannesburg Pick and Pay at 2 a.m., laughing at her inability to choose between 2 brands of chili sauce. He had stood, trembling, in her mother's sitting room in Enugu and asked permission, in halting Igbo he had practiced for 3 months, to marry her daughter. He had been, by every measure she possessed, a man who showed up. Until today. The wedding planner, a breathless young woman named Portia, materialized at Adaze's elbow. "He was in the groom's suite 12 minutes ago," she whispered, her clipboard pressed to her chest like armor. "He was adjusting his tie. He was laughing." She said it the way people say things they don't believe. Adaeze Obinna, in a custom gown of ivory aso oke woven through with threads of silver and Joseon-era silk that she and Hyunwoo had designed together, a garment that was itself a love story, set her jaw. She lifted the hem and walked. The groom's suite smelled of cedar and the specific brand of cologne her fiancé wore. His charcoal suit jacket hung on the back of a chair like a shed skin. His phone sat face down on the mahogany dresser, powered off. His monogrammed cufflinks were arranged in a small, careful row, the kind of arrangement a person makes when they plan to come back. He had not come back. A hotel manager hovered in the doorway. "Miss Obinna? Perhaps we call the police." "Find my husband." Her voice was a blade laid flat on stone. "Before I start looking myself." They searched for 2 hours. The guests dispersed in hushed clusters, leaving behind plates of untouched jollof and half-drunk glasses of Korean plum wine, the fusion menu Adaeze had spent 6 weeks curating. By the time the last car pulled from the courtyard, she was alone in the bridal suite, still in the gown, staring at herself in a gilt-framed mirror with the detached curiosity of someone meeting a stranger. The knock, when it came, was too precise to be kind. Park Sun-hee entered without being invited. She was 70 years old and dressed in a hanbok the color of dried blood, deep burgundy silk, silver embroidery at the collar, her white hair swept into a style that had not changed in 40 years. She moved like a woman who had never once doubted a decision. She placed an envelope on the vanity without looking at Adaeze. Cream-colored, unsealed, thick. "My son has honored his obligations to his family. This should more than address your discomfort." Adaeze looked at the envelope. She looked at the woman who would have been her mother-in-law. "Where is Hyunwoo?" "That is a question for his family, which you are not." "You did this." The words came out very quietly, which made them worse. "I protected an inheritance. I protected a name." The old woman moved toward the door with the unhurried certainty of someone who has never been denied a room. "Take the money. Return to Nigeria. You were a beautiful distraction, Miss Obinna. My son's heart ran ahead of his sense. It does not reflect poorly on you." She paused at the threshold. "But you were never going to be a park." The door clicked shut. The room was so quiet Adaeze could hear herself breathe. She did not touch the envelope. 6 weeks later, in a clinic in Lagos, smelling of antiseptic and the mild perfume of the nurse who called her in, a doctor showed her a small gray image on a screen. There was a flutter in it, rhythmic and insistent, like a thumb tapping against a table to prove it existed. "Congratulations," the doctor said gently. Adaeze pressed her fingers to her mouth, then to her stomach. Then she wept. Not from grief, which she had expected, but from something older and fiercer. A covenant she was making in a room no one from the Park family would ever enter. "This child," she decided, "will know only abundance. This child will carry my name and walk into every room like they belong. This child will never once wonder if they were enough." Maison Obinna. 7 years have a particular weight, not the weight of grief. Grief is acute, a knife. 7 years is sediment. It layers itself over the wound, not healing it exactly, but changing its texture. Adaeze Obinna had transformed her pain into architecture, a fashion house with 12 employees, a flagship atelier in the second arrondissement of Paris, and a profile in the Paris edition of Vogue that called her the Africa gifted the world without asking permission. She was 34 years old. She wore her hair in braided crowns laced with thin gold wire. She spoke 4 languages with authority, and a 5th, hesitant Korean, only to her daughter at bedtime. She had not been back to Seoul since the day she'd fled it. Her daughter's name was Adaeze Obinna. She called her Susu. Sui had her mother's deep brown skin and her father's architecture, the precise cheekbones, the watchful dark eyes that processed a room before commenting on it. She was 6 years old and already drawing dress patterns on the backs of envelopes. "Mama," Susu materialized at the atelier doorway, holding up a sketch of a dress covered with moons. "For your next collection." Adaeze knelt to her level, cupped her face, studied the drawing with absolute seriousness. "You've put pockets in. Every dress needs pockets. You're going to put me out of business." She kissed her forehead. "Go find Auntie Chiamaka." Susu tilted her head. "Mama, why don't I have a father?" The question arrived like a pin dropped in a marble hall, small, piercing, reverberating. Adaeze knew it was coming. She'd rehearsed versions of this answer for 3 years. None of them felt anything but inadequate. "You do have one, sweetheart. He lives far away." "Does he know I exist?" The silence lasted a beat too long. "It's complicated." Susu nodded with the grave acceptance of a child who has decided to store a question rather than discard it. She went to find Chiamaka. Adaeze stood. Her assistant, Chiamaka, 26, fiercely competent, and the only person Adaeze trusted entirely, appeared with a tablet. The Seoul Fashion Week confirmation came through. She showed the screen. Full headline slot, international showcase, creative control, accommodation, and this, she swiped to the fee. Adaze's chest moved once sharply. The number would fund Susi's education through university, open 2 new studios, and give her the leverage to acquire the Italian fabric house she'd had her eye on for 18 months. "The sponsor," she said carefully. "Park Grand Hotels." Chiamaka's voice was even. She had been with Adaeze from the beginning. She knew the history. Seoul, the parks, 7 years of architecture she'd built over a wound. "I need until tomorrow." "Ada," Chiamaka put the tablet down, "you don't have to." "I know." She turned to the window, the Paris rooftops silver in the autumn light. "That's different from shouldn't." That night, after Susi slept, Adaeze sat on the balcony with a glass of palm wine she'd had shipped from Enugu, opened her laptop. The invitation glowed. The cursor hovered between accept and decline for a long time. She thought about the version of herself still sitting in that hotel room in Johannesburg, staring at a cream-colored envelope. She thought about what it would mean to walk into a park property in a gown from her own collection, with a portfolio of work they could not ignore, and a daughter sleeping in the next room. She thought about what she'd once been told. You were never going to be a park. Her finger moved. She clicked, accept. The city that kept his name. Seoul received them with its particular brand of beautiful indifference. The Han River caught the afternoon light as the car from Incheon crossed it, and Sui pressed her face against the window, cataloging everything: the neon signs, the street vendors, the way the city stacked itself upward with absolute ambition. "Is this where you met him?" she asked, and Adaeze answered yes without elaborating, and Sui did not push, and the silence between them was full of every conversation they had not yet had. The welcome gala for Seoul Fashion Week was held in the Crystal Lotus Hotel's Grand Ballroom, a space that had been rebuilt twice in 7 years, but still carried the particular DNA of its original architecture. Adaeze knew the moment she stepped through the entrance. The chandeliers were different, the carpet was different, but the geometry of the room, the way it distributed light and sound, the exact angle of the mezzanine above, these were unchanged. Memory is stored in the body before the mind catches up, and Adaeze's body remembered this room with a precision that stole her breath. "Mama," Suyi's small hand found hers, "your hand is cold." "Old memories," she squeezed back. "I'm fine." She wore an emerald column dress from her latest collection, a garment she'd named Sovereign in the way she named everything now, with intention. Her braids were up, her gold cuffs caught the light. She looked like a woman who had survived something and decided to make it beautiful. Adaeze Obinna, the man who approached, was perhaps 45, trim in a bespoke navy suit, his smile practiced but not entirely without warmth. She recognized him before he offered his hand. Park Tae-jun, Hyunwoo's older brother. He'd been the softest of them, softer than his mother at least, which wasn't saying much. "Mr. Park, thank you for the invitation." "It's a privilege." His eyes dropped. Just briefly, to Suyi, something passed across his face, a calculation or a recognition. "Your work has redefined African luxury fashion, the Rebirth collection in particular." His eyes returned to Adaeze. "We're honored you considered us." "Ancient history," she said carefully, "shouldn't preclude good business." Tae-jun smiled. "I'll let our CEO welcome you personally. He wanted to." He gestured across the room. The crowd shifted, and there, 30 feet away, moving through the gala with the measured ease of a man who owned the floor he walked on, was Park Hyunwoo. He looked older, leaner at the jaw, distinguished in a charcoal suit that fit him the way only bespoke tailoring fits a man when someone with taste has chosen it for him. His face was composed, his eyes were scanning the room with a host's professional warmth. They landed on her. 7 years of fury, grief, and reconstructed dignity converged in Adaeze's sternum like a fist. She held it there. She had trained herself to hold things. Hyunwoo crossed the room and extended his hand. "Miss Obinna, welcome to Seoul. I'm Hyunwoo, CEO of Park Grand Hotels." His voice was the same, exactly the same, low, measured, with the slight Seoul accent he'd never quite shed, even after 3 years in London. "We've been looking forward to your showcase." She stared at his hand. She stared at his face. "We've met before," she said. Hyunwoo tilted his head. A faint line appeared between his brows. "Forgive me," he said. "I travel a great deal. I'm afraid I—" He stopped. He studied her face with a kind of attentive confusion, the way you study something familiar you cannot place. "I apologize. I don't recall." The world tilted 4 degrees and held there. He didn't know her, not a flicker of guilt, not the practiced blankness of a man suppressing recognition. He genuinely, completely did not know her face. Tae-jun touched his brother's arm. Miss Obinna is our headline designer. She's come a long way. He paused. Hyunwoo has some gaps from an accident several years ago. He's largely recovered, but certain periods... Please enjoy the evening, Hyunwoo said, his professional smile resuming. He glanced once more at Adaeze. Something flickered, just briefly, like a light bulb at the edge of failing, and then he moved away into the crowd. Soo-yi tugged Adaeze's sleeve. Mama, that man. Later, baby. His eyes are like mine. Taejun found her 30 minutes later and led her to a private lounge on the mezzanine level. He poured barley tea with the hands of a man who needed something to do with them. You deserve to know everything, he said. I have owed you this for 7 years and I've been a coward about it. Adaeze set down her cup. Then speak. His name was Dr. Chaeyeon. She'd been Hyunwoo's psychiatrist for 2 years before Adaeze ever entered the picture, and Hyunwoo's fiancée for 8 months before she wasn't. When Hyunwoo ended the engagement, quietly and without ceremony, Chaeyeon had complied publicly. Privately, she had not processed it as an ending. She had processed it as a complication. She studied him, Taejun said, the way psychiatrists do. She knew his routines, his loyalties, what calmed him and what undid him. When he met you, she began observing more closely. And the morning of the wedding? Taejun's jaw tightened. She delivered water to the groom's suite, said it was from me. A staff member confirmed she was seen in the corridor 30 minutes before the ceremony. He met Adaeze's eyes. We believe it was sedated. What happened next was she staged a car crash on the highway toward the venue using one of the hotel's secondary vehicles. Hyunwoo was found unconscious, traumatic brain injury. When he woke up in hospital 6 days later, his most recent 18 months were, the doctors called it a selective consolidation failure. The memories were there structurally, but retrieval pathways were severely damaged. The memories of me and everything surrounding you, your relationship, the engagement, the wedding, gone. Adaeze was quiet for a long time. Outside the mezzanine window, Seoul hummed with its 10 million lives. Your mother, she said finally. Taejun did not look away. Knew it within a week. She found Chaeyeon's phone records, the delivery confirmation from the hotel pharmacy. He paused. She decided it was convenient. Convenient? A clean outcome. No scandal, no African daughter-in-law, no mixed grandchildren to explain to her circle. He looked exhausted by his own family. She told Chaeyeon she would not go to the police if Chaeyeon agreed to become Hyunwoo's rehabilitation psychiatrist, to manage his recovery. She has been managing what he remembers for 7 years? Yes. Adaeze looked at her hands in her lap, the hands that had held dying roses. And Chaeyeon, she asked finally. She's still in Seoul, still in this building actually. She has a contracted relationship with the hotel's wellness program. Taejun leaned forward. Adaeze, he's been having episodes, dreams, fragments of imagery he can't locate in his waking life. A woman in white fabric, a song. He paused. He told me once that he keeps smelling shea butter and amberwood in his sleep. He wakes from it disturbed. He doesn't know why. Adaeze's breath moved through her in a slow, controlled wave. He's a victim, Taejun said quietly, as much as you are. I know, she stood. That doesn't make any of this hurt less. What children know. That night, So-yi would not sleep. She lay in the adjoining hotel room with her eyes open, the soul glow coming through the curtains and painting slow shapes on the ceiling. Adaeze lay beside her, watching her daughter think. The man at the party, So-yi said, Park Hyunwoo? Yes, he's my father. It wasn't a question. It had the declarative certainty of a child who processes information while appearing to be still. Adaeze closed her eyes briefly. Yes, he is. Why doesn't he know me? Because someone hurt him a long time ago and took some of his memories away. So-yi turned onto her side to look at her mother. In the dark, her eyes were very serious. Can we help him get them back? I don't know if it works that way, baby. But we could try. She pressed her small mouth together in a line that was entirely her father's expression, that Adaeze had to look at the ceiling. I think he felt something, she added. Did you see? His face got quiet. I saw. I think he felt something, she said. He looked at me like he was trying to remember something. Did you see? His face got quiet. I saw. I think he felt something curling against her mother's side, like recognizing a song you don't know the words to yet. Adaeze held her daughter and said nothing. Outside, Seoul continued its perpetual hum. From somewhere in the hotel, barely audible, came the sound of a piano being played, something soft, meandering, searching for its own resolution. Adaeze's phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. She picked it up. One line, no greeting. What's buried is meant to stay buried. Go home. She stared at it. Then she checked Soyee's breathing, slow, even, asleep. She set the phone face down and lay very still in the dark, listening to her own heartbeat calibrate itself back to normal. The second message came at 3:17 a.m. Last warning, leave Seoul. She doesn't belong here, and neither do you. Adaeze sat up, Soyee slept on. She crossed to the window and looked at the city below, the lit bridges, the river, the geometry of a place that had swallowed her and spat her out 7 years ago. She felt something harden in her chest. Not rage, harder than rage, the specific resolve of a woman who has built something from nothing and will not be unmade by a text message. She typed back, I'm here to do a show. Come find me if you want a different conversation. She put the phone down. She went back to sleep. In the morning, Soyee was gone. The adjoining door was locked from the inside. This was the detail that separated fear from terror. Not the empty bed, not the rumpled sheets, not the small pair of shoes left beside the dresser. The door locked from the inside meant it had been done deliberately, so that Adaeze would not hear the window open. Adaeze took 14 seconds to stop shaking. Then she called Taejun. She took my daughter. Her voice was a flat line. Chaeyeon took Fuyi. I've had 2 messages from an unknown number warning me to leave Seoul. I think she's been watching us since we arrived. Taejun's silence lasted 3 seconds. Did she say where? The third message arrived as she spoke it. Come where it all ended. Come alone or the child stays with me. You have 1 hour. Namsan Tower. Namsan, Adaeze said. 1 hour. Alone. That's where the accident happened. The original crash site is on the approach road to the tower. Taejun's voice was controlled, but not entirely. Ada, don't go alone. Stall her. I'm getting Hyunwoo. She said alone. And I'm telling you that a woman who drugged a man, staged a car crash, and manipulated a psychiatric practice for 7 years is not going to honor a condition because you honored it. Wait for us. If anything happens to my daughter, nothing will happen to Soyee, I promise you. Keep that line open. The taxi took 17 minutes. Every traffic light was a small death. Adaeze sat very still in the back seat with her hands flat on her thighs, running scenarios the way she ran pattern calculations, methodically, without sentiment. She thought about Soyee's voice. I felt it too, like recognizing a song you don't know the words to yet. She thought about how her daughter had slept against her with complete trust in a city that was trying to erase them both. The tower rose through the city's light pollution, its observation deck glowing amber against a sky just beginning to consider dawn. Adaeze took the elevator alone, watching the floor numbers rise, counting the way a woman does when the only alternative is screaming. When the doors opened, the observation deck hit her with cold wind and the full panorama of Seoul spreading in every direction, 10 million lights, the river a black ribbon below. And at the far edge of the deck, where the railing ended and the sky began, stood Chaeyeon. She was smaller than Adaeze had imagined, slight, pale, her dark hair loose and lifting in the wind. She wore a white coat, a psychiatrist's reflex perhaps, or theater. One hand gripped the railing, the other held Soyee's wrist. Soo-yi was standing very still with the deliberate calm of a child who has decided that stillness is safer than movement. Her eyes found her mother and she breathed out, one small, controlled exhale, and did not cry. "Let her go." Adaeze kept walking. "Stop." Chaeyeon's voice was high and thin, frayed at the edges. "If you take one more step, we both go over." Adaeze stopped. The wind pushed between them. "She has nothing to do with this." Her voice was even, surgically even. "She's 6 years old. She just wants to see the city." "She has everything to do with this." Chaeyeon's composure cracked down the middle like old porcelain. "She's the proof that even when I erased you, even when I cut you out of him as cleanly as a surgical incision, you were still there. He still dreams you, still wakes up calling a name he can't reach. I gave him everything, and he kept dreaming of a woman who doesn't exist in his mind anymore." Her voice broke entirely. "Do you understand what that is? To be replaced by a ghost?" "I understand betrayal," Adaeze said carefully, and she took a slow half-step. "I understand being left standing in a room with nothing but an envelope. I understand building your whole life around someone and finding out the ground was never solid." She kept her eyes on Chaeyeon's. "I understand that. What I don't understand is choosing to make a child pay for it." "I was pregnant," Chaeyeon said it like pulling glass from skin, "when I caused the crash. I thought if I could just stop the wedding, just interrupt it, he'd come back to me. I didn't plan for it to be. The impact was harder than—" She exhaled. "I lost the baby. I lost everything. And then I spent 7 years holding his mind together in my hands, keeping every thread of you out of it. And he still. Her grip on Soo-yi's wrist loosened. And from the elevator behind Adaeze, footsteps. Park Hyunwoo stepped onto the observation deck. He was still in the clothes from the gala, his jacket open, his face stripped of every professional courtesy. His eyes moved from Chaeyeon to Soo-yi to Adaeze and back to Chaeyeon with an expression Adaeze had never seen on him. Not anger, not exactly, but the particular devastation of a man reading a document that changes everything he thought was true. "Chaeyeon." His voice was quiet and terrible. "Chaeyeon." Step away from the child. He walked slowly, deliberately, the way you walk towards something you cannot let yourself be afraid of. "Step away and look at me." "She's trying to confuse you, whatever Taejun has told you." "I've been having a dream," he said. He kept walking. "A dream for 3 years. A woman in ivory fabric, a hall full of people, a string quartet, and the specific smell." He stopped. He looked at Adaeze directly, and something moved through his expression like a light coming on in a house you thought was empty. "Shea butter and amber wood." Chaeyeon's face collapsed. "The morning of the ceremony," Hyunwoo said, "you brought me water. You said my hands were shaking, that I needed to calm down. You said it was from Taejun. I took it because I trusted you, because for 2 years I had sat in your office and given you every fragile piece of myself and believed you were holding them safely. And you used everything I ever told you about what I feared and what I loved, and you used it to take my life apart." "I loved you." Chaeyeon was weeping. "I loved you more than she ever could." "Love is not a justification for theft." His voice cracked and held. "You stole 7 years from me, from my daughter, from the woman I had chosen." He looked at Soo-yi, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time with the full knowledge of who she was, and Adaeze watched the moment it hit him. The architecture of the small face, the eyes, his mother's cheekbones, his own eyes looking back at him in miniature. Chaeyeon reached for the railing. "Don't." Hyunwoo caught her arm. "No more. This ends here, and we all walk away from this ledge, and you face what you've done, but no one else gets destroyed tonight." The name she carried. Soo-yi ran to her mother. Adaeze caught her and held her, and for a moment did nothing else, just held the warm, trembling weight of her daughter and breathed. Her arms went around her neck and stayed there. Neither of them spoke. Some reunions don't need language. Below them, Taejun had arrived with security. The sound of sirens drifted up from the base of the tower. Chaeyeon sat on the deck floor, no longer resisting, her white coat pooling around her, her face a landscape of consequences. When the officers came, she stood without being asked. She looked, Adaeze thought, like a woman who was almost relieved to be caught. 7 years of maintenance is its own exhaustion. Hyunwoo stood a few feet away from Adaeze, his hands at his sides. He was looking at Soo-yi the way a man looks at something too large and too real to be processed all at once. "Can I?" He stopped, tried again. "May I speak to her?" Adaeze held her daughter slightly back from herself, enough to see her face. "Susu, this is Park Hyunwoo. He's your father." Soo-yi studied him. She had her mother's thoroughness and her father's patience. She took him in fully, his height, his hands, the way he was trying not to cry and failing, and then she stepped forward and touched his face with one small hand, the way children touch things they want to understand. "You have the same eyes as me," she said. He knelt down to her level. His voice, when he found it, was wrecked. "I know. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I want you to know that nothing about your being here, nothing was ever anything except right. You were never an accident. You were—" He exhaled. "I just didn't get to know about you." Soo-yi considered this. "Mama says some people forget important things." "He's right. But you came back." "I came back." His voice broke on the last syllable. Soo-yi patted his cheek once gently, with the decisive pragmatism of someone who has assessed a situation and decided on forgiveness. "Okay," she said simply, and then, because she was 6 and cold and had been through a great deal, "Can we go inside? I'm hungry." Adaeze laughed, a sound she hadn't expected from herself, shocked out of her chest by this precise child. Hyunwoo laughed too, and for a moment the observation deck of Namsan Tower held the incongruous warmth of something that had cracked open and was still improbably breathing. They ate in the hotel kitchen at midnight, a chef summoned from sleep, soft tofu stew and a goosey soup improvised from what was available, a meal that was itself a kind of symbol. Soo-yi ate with focused intensity and then fell asleep on a kitchen bench with her coat folded under her head, and no one moved her, and the 3 adults sat around her and talked in low voices with the careful deliberateness of people dismantling something very old. Adaeze told him the parts she knew. Taejun filled the rest. Hyunwoo listened without interrupting, and when it was done, he sat for a long time with his hands around a mug of cooling tea. 7 years, he said. 7 years. She was born in Lagos, June. It rained all day. Adaeze looked at Soo-yi sleeping. She came out screaming and then stopped and looked around the room as if she was taking inventory. The doctor said she'd never seen a quieter newborn. I said she was deciding what to make of the place. Hyunwoo looked at his daughter's sleeping face. Something in him was visibly reorganizing. "Her first word," he said quietly. Taejun said, "What was it?" Adaeze's throat moved. "Papa." He put his face in his hands. His shoulders moved. Adaeze did not look away and did not comfort him. She let him have it, let him hold the full weight of the lost years without reduction. She understood now that he was as much a victim as she was, which did not remove the grief, but complicated it in the way that truth always complicates things. After a while, he lifted his face. His eyes were red. "I don't know how to ask you for anything. I don't have standing to ask you for anything. But I want to be in her life, whatever that looks like, whatever constraints you need. I want to be here." Adaeze looked at him for a long moment. "She calls you Papa already," she said finally. In her head, she decided on the observation deck. I could see it. She paused. That's going to be your problem to grow into. The show happened anyway. 3 days later, under the full lights of the International Seoul Showcase, Adaeze Obinna's collection walked its final runway to a standing ovation that lasted 4 minutes. The collection was called Meridian, 12 looks, built from the intersection of aso-oke and rami linen, Joseon court embroidery techniques applied to Ankara silhouettes, each piece carrying the visual logic of 2 histories demanding to be held in the same body. The critics called it the most significant statement of the season. One review said it made the audience feel, in some undefinable way, like a door had been opened. Adaeze stood in the wings and watched the last model take her bow and thought, I made this from wreckage. Let them have it. 8 months later, snow on the ground outside a brownstone in Brooklyn. The kitchen smelled of ginger and cardamom. On the refrigerator, one drawing of a family of 4 under a rainbow, executed in crayon with architectural ambition. Hyunwoo had been in therapy twice a week for 6 months, not with Chaeyeon, who was facing criminal proceedings in Seoul, but with a neuropsychologist in Manhattan who was careful and honest with him about what was recoverable and what was not. Some memories came back cleanly, like photographs developed from old film. Others came back as fragments, texture without narrative, emotion without event. Some, the therapist said, might not return at all. Hyunwoo had decided that was a fact he could live with. What he could not live with was absence. I remembered something this morning, he said, handing Adaeze her coffee. Our first meal together, the Thai place near Borough Market. You ordered 3 things because you couldn't decide and then ate all of them in the wrong order. The noodles first. Why would anyone eat the noodles first? So they don't get cold. She smiled. It was the specific smile she reserved for things that still surprised her. You remember that? Pieces, but they're coming back. He crossed the kitchen and placed one hand flat on her stomach, gently, with the reverence of a man who understood precisely what he was touching. Their second child, not yet visible, but already present in every way that mattered. Papa, Soo-yi appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, brandishing a drawing. I made the baby's first outfit. Hyunwoo lifted her without ceremony, examining the drawing with the gravity she required. A tiny garment covered in stars and what appeared to be tigers. This is exceptional work. It has pockets. Of course it does. Adaeze watched them over the rim of her coffee cup. The morning light was doing something specific to the kitchen, the way winter light does in that particular hour before the city fully wakes, when everything is still and possible and almost without cost. She had learned to receive good things carefully, the way you receive something held out over a long distance, not snatching at it, not refusing it, just receiving it. Park Sun-hee, Hyunwoo's mother, had called 4 times in the past 3 months. The first 2 calls Adaeze had not answered. The third, she'd listened for 3 minutes to corporate language about regrettable circumstances before interrupting. If you want to meet your granddaughter, you apologize. Not to me, to her, for taking her father away before she was born. The call was silent for a long time. Then, I was protecting my family. I believed I was right. I was not. It wasn't enough, but it was real, which was a start. The 4th call had been shorter. Park Sun-hee was coming to New York in December. Adaeze had told Soo-yi she had a grandmother who lived far away. Soo-yi had nodded and said, "Is she mean?" And Adaeze had considered this carefully and said, she used to be afraid of things that weren't scary, which made her do scary things. And Soo-yi had said, "Oh," and then gone back to her drawing. Children, Adaeze had decided, are better at the architecture of forgiveness than adults. They build it from the present, not the past. That afternoon, while Soo-yi napped and the snow came down in slow, thick curtains over Brooklyn, Hyunwoo found an old playlist on his phone, recovered from a backup he didn't know existed until the therapist suggested a digital archaeology of the years he'd lost. He pressed play without looking at the title. A piano introduction filled the kitchen. Then a voice. Moon River, wider than a mile. He stood very still. The song ran through him like current through water, accessing something beneath language, beneath thought, a flash of ivory fabric, a hand held in both of his, a hall full of flowers and candlelight, and Adaeze's face turned up to his with the expression of someone who has made a decision they will not reconsider. Adaeze came into the kitchen and found him standing at the counter with tears on his face and the song playing softly between them. She crossed the room. She took his hand. "I remember dancing," he said. "You do?" "I remember the way you smelled." His voice was unsteady. "I remember that your hands were shaking and I held them and you stopped shaking. I remember thinking I was the luckiest man in any room." "Adaeze," Hyunwoo, "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he said, "the way you say the last true thing. I'm sorry you stood in that hall and I wasn't beside you. I'm sorry for the years Soo-yi spent without me. I'm sorry for every morning you woke up and had to rebuild what I was supposed to be part of. I will spend the rest of my life making it real, not making it up, making it real, every morning I can." Adaeze was quiet for a moment. Then, "The song's still playing." He pulled back to look at her. His eyes were red and wide. He extended his free hand, palm up, with the same gesture she'd seen 7 years ago in a Thai restaurant near Borough Market. "May I have this dance?" She put her hand in his. He pulled her close. They turned slowly in the kitchen, in the thin winter light, in the warmth of the only morning that was actually theirs. Not the morning they'd planned, not the one that was taken from them, but this one, this improbable one, assembled from what remained and what had been recovered and what was still being discovered. From the doorway, a small figure in striped pajamas watched them with the evaluating eyes of a child who has already begun composing the story she will tell about this moment when she is older. Soo-yi, who had woken from her nap as quietly as she did everything else, leaned against the doorframe and watched her parents dance and decided with 6-year-old finality that this was the correct outcome. Then she went to get her sketchbook because she had an idea for a dress. Adaeze Obinna Park, she added his name a year later, hyphenated because the story belonged to both of them, would go on to open her flagship Seoul studio in 2031. She named it Meridian. In the entrance hall, in lieu of a logo, she had a single line embroidered in both Igbo and Korean, in gold thread on ivory linen. "Some things do not break us, they teach us the exact location of our strength."